Hi, Valerie. We're so glad you're with us again. Let me see. And we have Cathy O'Hara, awesome. Cobb County, awesome. Rome, Hannah, thank you for coming. Lori, you were on here early and I meant to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for coming. Lori's going to be speaking next month, actually, for one of our professional learning series. So we're excited.
I'm excited to be there.
Yay. Katie. Oh, welcome, Katie, from the Alabama as well. Thank you.
It's neat.
Hi, Karen. Another Karen. Karen's always good. Awesome. Thank you all for coming tonight. So I'm gonna get cracking on just a couple of things we want to highlight. For those of you, if this is your first time, just so you know, we have this professional learning series going on all year. It's mostly twice a month. They're typically for Georgia TESOL members only, unless it's labeled as public. So if you're not a member already, make sure you become a member. I think tonight's a members only. So you guys are probably all members. There we go. But you feel free to invite others to become members. We try to provide talks of issues across, or not even issues, but things that we're addressed, can't keep saying issues, but concerns, and just things that we run into as a part of the TESOL profession at different levels. So sometimes it's elementary, sometimes it's higher ed, sometimes it's, really K-12 a lot of the time, sometimes it's family. And so we're doing that all year. And now you can get a certificate of participation from us. So if that helps you, because we want to acknowledge your time and help you in your professional growth. So if you need to be able to document that you've attended X number of talks or workshops around TESOL topics, then we're here to help. And so towards the end, you will see a link in the chat where you can give all we ask is for your feedback. So you give us your feedback and we'll send you a certificate. That's pretty much how it goes. So that'll be available towards the end. This year, we're going to have a mid-year social. May the 4th be with you. And details will be coming probably next week about that, because we're going to finalize that at our board meeting this week. And then we'll have a little break in July, but then we'll be back. But beyond July, we have some other things going on. We have 2 major series going on, and these are open to the public. So one is around parent, student, and community empowerment. We've had 2 sessions. Well, we've had our first session now, and then we'll have 2 sessions in April, one in August and one in September, all highlighting different aspects of empowering our families and our communities. And then in June, we have a special one that's meant to be really a kind of PD series for scaffolding content and language in the different content areas. So we're going to start off talking about the new WIDA standards, and then we will have we'll have facilitators from, I should not even speak facilitators, but speakers from Georgia DOE who are going to come in each week during the month of June and do these talks on the different content areas. And really, and I think that's powerful because we'll get to hear from the state what they're looking for and other ways to help us integrate language and content. So the last thing I want to highlight is our next session, which is March 16th, 2 weeks from tonight. We are going to be talking about our new Georgia TESOL Multilingual Writers Contest. And so we really hope everyone will try to come to that one because we want you to get your students involved. This is going to be a fun way to get our students involved. We're hoping to be able to conduct the contest so in a timely fashion so that we can award our students at our Georgia TESOL conference in October or by that point. And so this is going to be a really great session for everyone to attend. So we do hope to see you there. And now we are going to turn it over to our lovely illustrious speaker for this evening, who is Cathy Amanti. She's retired now, but she has been so instrumental in dual language in the state of Georgia and so many other things around language learners. And we're so excited that she agreed to do this talk for us tonight. So Cathy, take it away.
Great, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And a special shout out to Lori Edmonds. A number of years ago, we actually co-presented on the Funds of Knowledge at a TESOL conference, an international TESOL conference in Toronto. It was a lot of fun. So thank you all of you for being here after a long day of work. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And here we go. Okay, so the title of this professional learning session is Integrating Family and Community Knowledge in the Curriculum, a Funds of Knowledge Approach. Oopsie. There we go. Okay, in this session, I'm going to be talking about the problem with standardized and prepackaged curricula, localizing curricula using family and community funds of knowledge, and misunderstandings and benefits of a funds of knowledge approach to family engagement, curriculum design, and English language teaching. But before I begin, I wanted to make it clear that a funds of knowledge approach to family engagement is a complete break from your typical family engagement in schools. So the norm is to design family engagement programs to fix parents, to teach them how to parent and/or how to support their child with schoolwork at home. A funds of knowledge approach to family engagement, on the other hand, positions teachers as learners and families as teachers with knowledge and skills that schools should be aware of and that can be drawn on in schools to help students achieve academic success. So I'd like to encourage you to write down any questions that you have during the presentation. And I'm hoping that there will be time at the end to answer any questions or comments that you have. So I just want to get started by having you just reflect briefly on a couple of questions. And the questions are, do you use prepackaged or standardized curricula? And I take curricula to mean the content and skills students are expected to learn. If you don't use prepackaged or standardized curricula, who develops the curriculum that you implement in your classroom? And just in general, how responsive is the curriculum you use to the histories, language practices, and everyday lives of your most marginalized students? So I'm going to pause and give you a few minutes to write your responses to those questions in the chat. What is the curricula that you're currently using in your class?
Cathy, when you ask who develops the curriculum, are you talking about the publishers or the actual authors?
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay, great.
Oops. I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute so I can see the chat. The curricula that you use in the classroom, what guides your instruction? Are you using a prepackaged curriculum? A textbook to guide your instruction?
And what was the third question, Cathy?
How responsive is the curriculum that you're
Responsive.
using to,
Mhm.
yeah, to the everyday lives of your students? Okay, we'll take about 1 more minute for anyone else that wants to respond. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So when I taught in, I taught ESOL in Arizona, and we had a prepackaged curriculum. It looked a lot like what you see pictured in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. It was complete with supplementary materials. We had textbooks, we had CDs, we had all kinds of different things. And then we also, the state had their own ESOL standards. And so they were pre-developed, and I didn't have any part in developing them. So if you do use prepackaged or standardized curricula, it's important to note that it's designed by people that are removed from and unfamiliar with your students and your classroom. It's also typically based on the knowledge and experiences of the elite, which means that no curriculum is neutral or culture free. In addition, along with standardized assessments, it imposes control of teaching from a distance. Other characteristics of standardized and prepackaged curricula include the fact that a universal one-size-fits-all curriculum minimizes recognition of diversity in classrooms. It reduces teacher flexibility in meeting the needs of minoritized students. It also limits teachers' ability to incorporate and build on local knowledge. And as ESOL and DLI educators, we know this and experience it firsthand. But it's worthwhile to remember this and revisit these facts regularly, especially because most of our emergent bilinguals, our multilingual learners, spend a good amount of time in general education classrooms where they're taught with standardized and or prepackaged curricula that was not normed on English learners, students categorized as English learners, are emergent bilinguals, or developed with them in mind. So to summarize the problem with standardized and prepackaged curricula, here's a quote from Michael Apple, and I'm going to pause and let you read it. Now to that last sentence, I'd add that dominant groups have an absolute power over what knowledge and what language are worth transmitting. So anybody who's spent time in a classroom knows that each student is unique, that each student has a unique learning profile. Also that each student brings a wealth of knowledge and experience with them to the classroom. The question is, how can we identify this knowledge and experience to leverage the academic success of our most marginalized students? Well, one way is to learn about our students' funds of knowledge and design curricula around those funds of knowledge. But you can't learn about your students' funds of knowledge, which I'm going to define in just a minute, by reading a book, the newspaper, or watching TV or movies. You can only learn about your students' funds of knowledge by getting to know them and their families on a deep and personal level. So I'm going to share the experiences of researchers and teachers that implemented a study to identify students' funds of knowledge, then integrate them in the teacher's classroom practices. And I was one of the teachers that participated in this study that I'm going to be talking about this evening. So the research study had 3 components. The first component was teachers conducted ethnographic research in their students' homes to learn about family history, work, everyday activities, and how students participate in the life of their homes and their family social network. The second component was teachers met in study groups to share findings from their home visits and to discuss the significance of what they were learning. And finally, teachers developed and taught curriculum based on their students' funds of knowledge. I want to emphasize again that in this study, teachers entered their students' homes as learners. They didn't go to talk about how the student was performing or behaving in school. I also want to emphasize that the teachers that participated in the study received preparation before visiting their homes of their students. We didn't just go unprepared out into our students' homes. The preparation we received involved learning about the meaning of the concept funds of knowledge, as well as how to conduct ethnographic research. Now, why ethnographic research? That's a type of research most closely associated with anthropologists. Well, the reason that ethnographic research was what we used to frame our visits to our students' homes is because in ethnography, you learn to listen and observe without making any prior judgment about the student or their family based on their demographic characteristics. Anything you observe or hear can be a clue to a family's funds of knowledge. For example, a colleague of mine, when visiting the home of one of her students, was served a beautifully decorated piece of cake by the student's mother. And my colleague asked about it. And the mother told her that she had a home business of making and decorating cakes for a special occasion, which she sold to earn money. Home businesses require many skills, such as mathematics, which can be leveraged in schools. So let's take a minute to understand what is meant by the funds of knowledge concept. It's defined as historically formed strategic bodies of essential information that households need to maintain their well-being. So I'm going to unpack that definition by providing an example of the concept. An example of funds of knowledge is the knowledge and skills involved in cattle ranching. This example comes from the southwestern United States near the US-Mexico border, where the research I'm talking about and sharing this evening took place. It's where I was teaching at the time I was involved in this study. Cattle ranching, as shown in the picture on the left, has been an important economic activity in the US-Mexico border region since early in the Spanish colonial period. Many people in this region continue to work in this industry to this day. The work involves skills or funds of knowledge, such as roping cows, as you see in the rodeo, in the picture on the bottom right. So this work also requires knowledge regarding the care of horses. This was a theme that emerged on my home visits the year I participated in the Funds of Knowledge research study, and is why I developed and taught a thematic unit around the theme of horses that year. So income earned from working in the cattle ranching industry supports households in maintaining their well-being to this day. Again, once teachers visited their students' homes, they collaboratively designed curricula that built on the funds of knowledge they had found on their visits. So here's some more detailed examples of thematic units some of the other teachers that were participating in the funds of knowledge research study at the same time that I was developed. So in this example of a funds of knowledge-based curriculum unit, the primary level dual language teacher that developed it was inspired by families in her school community with extensive knowledge about different aspects of construction. Many of her students' families had added additions to their homes themselves, and some of her students even had their own construction tools. Here are some of the activities she included, and I'm going to pause to let you read them. Now, from an English language teaching perspective, this example incorporates multiple opportunities for language learning and development across multiple language domains. Now, I want to stress now, I just want to take an aside to stress that the idea behind the Funds of Knowledge research study and the application of funds of knowledge to schools was not to teach students anything they already knew, but rather to ground the curriculum in their lived realities and affirm the wealth of knowledge found in their homes and communities. Now, here's another example of curricula based on family funds of knowledge developed by a 5th grade dual language teacher that participated in the research study. The initial inspiration for this thematic unit came from the mother of one of the teacher's students, who he learned was a highly skilled seamstress when he visited her home. This mother, like the example I just shared of the mother who earned money for making and decorating cakes from her home, used her funds of knowledge to earn money from work she also did at home and outside of the formal economy. She was self-employed. So the teacher began by asking students, what do you know about clothing and why do people wear certain clothing? I'll pause to let you read some of the other topics addressed in this Funds of Knowledge-based curriculum unit. So as you can see in the Funds of Knowledge study, we considered any type of knowledge related to earning income and maintaining the well-being of a family to be valuable. It didn't matter if the income was earned in the formal economy or the informal economy. Note that neither horses nor construction nor clothes are common topics for multicultural curriculum, but they make complete sense once you delve into the sociocultural histories of your students and their families and the area where you live and work. Now I want to stop here and I'll stop sharing my screen in just a minute. But I wanted to stop here and give you the opportunity to think and talk about what types of knowledge you have found or might find in the homes of students in your area related to their financial and physical well-being. Also, how you might be able to design curriculum based on that knowledge. So something that comes to my mind for anyone living, for example, on the coast of Georgia, is the knowledge and skills students may acquire regarding the fishing and shrimping industry. So here are the discussion questions. What are some of the principal economic activities in your region that contribute to the well-being of your students' families? And be sure to consider economic activities in both the formal and the informal economy. And also, how could you incorporate household knowledge about those economic activities in your curriculum? And I think there's enough time for you to have about 10 minutes in your groups. And Karen will divide you into groups. And let's go ahead and just divide maybe into 2 groups and answer these questions. And I'm going to copy and paste them in the chat. And then maybe we can copy and paste them again. Here we go.
You want me to send it out now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, and then let me go back and
Let me try to mark you as not a, you are not going to a breakout room. I have to do that. I'll figure it out. Okay, here we go.
and then here we go. I'll go ahead and join and
I'm trying to give Cathy the
It's still just us. Where's everybody else?
It's because they're still in their group talking.
Yeah. And
They'll come.
maybe
Yeah.
Karen's the one facilitating. She's in control. Oh, wait, maybe I can. You have been assigned. Okay. No. Okay, here we go.
Normally it kicks you out, but Zoom keeps changing features. So who knows, maybe in an update they decided we won't do that. to people.
Yeah. So very exciting. Okay. So everybody having a good semester?
Yeah, it's busy, always.
Yeah.
Very busy. Yeah.
Well, and have you guys had some of the crazy weather over there?
Yeah. We tend to get it first, and then it comes to Atlanta or it comes to Georgia. So,
Well, I think we missed the worst of it. Didn't you have some hurricanes? I mean, not hurricanes, tornadoes?
a couple of weeks ago we did. Yes.
Yeah. Fortunately, it missed us, even though we're not that far away.
Does Georgia get tornadoes a lot?
No, not really.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Some flooding. Let me see if I can.
Unfortunately, Alabama does get a lot of tornadoes.
I'm checking if I can see because we're going to run out of time here. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. Oh, we were wondering where you guys were.
Great
You
discussion.
must have been having a good discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. When everybody gets back, I'd love to hear a summary of.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't remember how much time you said. So, so we just kept talking.
So let's see. The group I was in, it was the Alabama group. So that was a lot of fun. Did you do that on purpose? Oh, I think you're muted.
No, it was random, completely random.
Well, it was amazing. I learned a lot about Alabama and what's going on in Alabama and what the economic landscape is like there. So is there anybody that wants to share from the Alabama group about what we discussed? And then we'll see what the other one must be the Georgia group. Or I'll just open it up. Is there anybody that wants to share a highlight from their discussion?
We just kind of, so we were the Alabama group, and we just thought through some of the economic resources, and that was a good exercise. I don't know, honestly, I'll be honest, I don't know if I've thought about it in exactly that way. And I found that to be quite helpful. Excuse me. So we just kind of listed off a couple of things. So what came to mind, I think, was first construction, restaurants, and landscaping. And in terms of the formal options, we also later realized that we were naming off economic resources that were primarily for our Latinx communities, and then thinking and kind of broadening our scope a little bit. You know, we have nail salons for the Vietnamese community. Then informally, I think Katie was able, there were a couple people that were able to really kind of contribute, that knew individuals that either made different foodstuffs or did things on an individual level that would be more informal. So that's kind of what we talked about.
How about the other group? Does anybody want to share from the other group?
Go, Karen.
I don't want to dominate. I want Cathy, or who else is with us? Elizabeth, or was Katie with us? Yeah. You all want to talk about the things we discussed?
That's okay.
I will say
go
something.
ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Edmonds and Dr. Prado. Okay, so we talked about a lot of different things because I was the only Alabama person
Oh.
in my group. So repping two different communities. And I think the main idea that we talked about was taking small steps to reach a big goal. And so something that I think I kind of shared was about my specific school that I work at was how broad the population of students in the communities they come from is, because some of the kids at our school they're like scattered out like a pretty good distance away from the school. And one thing that Karen talked about was from your time in Boston and Massachusetts. Is that where you were talking about?
Yes.
She's talking about how you could drive 30 minutes one way and the economic makeup of the area is completely different. And I feel like that's kind of what I experience. I live in a different place, but when I drive to the school I work at, the area and the vibe and the economic, local economic, I guess, resources, is completely different, for the kids I serve.
Mhm.
And so just talking about how we need to take small steps to try to reach out to those families and get to know them little by little the best we can, and try to slowly bring them into the school and try to, I guess, go from there to try to incorporate all those background knowledge things that they have from their culture and their family lives into the curriculum. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm just writing myself a note. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen again. I'm trying to keep track of the time and be respectful of everybody's time, because I know many of you probably, let me see. One sec, because you're probably seeing all this. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to point out what are some of the misunderstandings people have about the concept funds of knowledge. First of all, funds of knowledge and culture are not synonyms. A lot of people talk about funds of knowledge as if it was interchangeable with the concept culture. But we often think of culture as superficial traits, such as traditional foods, clothes, and holidays shared by homogeneous groups of people. But funds of knowledge stems not from special cultural events and traditions of the past, but from the everyday productive activities of families. Some will be unique to a family and others will be shared. So from a funds of knowledge perspective, it is not wrong if a family's practices do not mirror traditional cultural norms. Next, again, you cannot learn about your students' funds of knowledge by reading a book or watching a movie or a TV show. You can only learn about them by getting to know your students and their families on a deep personal level. And finally, because funds of knowledge units and curriculum arise from family history and student demographics are constantly shifting, you can't, for example, standardize a funds of knowledge-based curriculum unit and teach the same one from year to year. In my case, for instance, not all of my students from year to year could or would connect to a unit on horses. So again, funds of knowledge curriculum and funds of knowledge unit or thematic units based on funds of knowledge cannot be standardized. So regarding the advantages of a funds of knowledge approach to designing curriculum, first, a funds of knowledge lens shifts the focus away again from superficial cultural traits and helps teachers avoid cultural stereotyping by giving them the tools to authentically know their students. And the tools are the concept of funds of knowledge and ethnographic research methods. And I don't know of any other approach to multicultural education that gives teachers the tools to learn about the actual lived cultural and linguistic practices of their students, rather than relying on what they imagine them to be based on second or third hand information. Also, the actual knowledge and skills of all families are viewed as important cognitive and academic resources. This means, for example, that the knowledge and skills of a farm worker are as relevant in the classroom and to the curriculum as those of a medical doctor. The child of a farm worker is potentially bringing expert knowledge of plant life cycles, weather, the seasons, insects, and more to the classroom, all of which are part of the primary science standards. This also counters established knowledge hierarchies where some knowledge, that of the elite, is considered more valuable than that of marginalized groups. Additional advantages of applying a funds of knowledge framework to curriculum development include the fact that teachers are positioned as knowledgeable intellectuals and researchers. Teachers have more control over their classroom practice. Classroom isolation is reduced, and teachers develop strong, multifaceted relationships with their students' families, and their students' communities. Now, I'm going to just wrap up by sharing some of the advantages of applying the funds of knowledge framework to curriculum development in English language teaching in particular. These include the fact that ESOL content and materials related to students' funds of knowledge increase comprehensible input. Also, a funds of knowledge focused approach to developing lessons ensures they're meaningful to students' lives. As Jampart and Nussbaum point out, participation in meaningful activities generates learning, both of the forms of language and other abilities to communicate. And finally, a funds of knowledge approach helps ESOL educators counter the native speakerism and Anglocentrism inherent in English language teaching. So now it's your turn, and in just a minute, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that you can have the opportunity of making any kind of comment you'd like or asking any questions. But before I open it up for questions and comments, I want to encourage you to read the article linked to this presentation, which describes the experiences of a group of educators from Iowa that traveled to a small community in Mexico where many of their immigrant students were from. And what the teachers learned by traveling there helped them to be better teachers for those students. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and we've got some time to share and ask questions.
So David, do you want to repeat your question from the chat?
Oh,
Yeah, okay, cool. No, I'm always interested in research. And you mentioned your own study that you conducted in the beginning of the presentation. And I'm just interested, do you have the reference for that I can then locate the article and read it? Or if you want to send me the article, I'd be more than happy to read it.
I will send you the article.
Awesome.
Is it something that I can put in the chat right now for everybody?
Yeah, you can put it in there if you got a link to it, or if you don't have a link to it, you can send it to me, and I'll send it in as part
Okay,
of
that'll be great. I'll send the PDF to Karen, and she can. So I'll send you the article. It's the one that's cited the most often. It's from 1992, but there's also an edited volume on funds of knowledge that was published in 1905. 2005.
That's so great.
That's amazing. I'm the most well-preserved presenter you're ever going to see. So it's it's funds of knowledge, theorizing practices in households and communities. Ooh.
So I mean, as people are writing their questions, I am curious. So what were some of the not struggles, but what were some things that you were surprised with when you went through your study?
That's a great question. So the joke was that it was harder to get out of the households than into them, that we were so welcomed and the families were so welcoming to us that we ended up spending way more time on our home visits than we had planned. And we found that we were invited to quinceañeras, we were invited to, I was invited to a church dedication and, baptisms and birthday parties. So I guess I would say a challenge was finding the time to do the work. I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And because, our schools, the institutions are not designed to, they're not conducive to this kind of work. Now, I always want to point out that we never showed up unannounced to the homes. We always made arrangements ahead of time. I personally never had a parent say, no, I don't want you to come. They were always very, very welcoming. and were extremely happy. And, we explained to them why we were there, that we were there to learn from them, and that, we were doing this so that we could be better teachers. But yeah, I definitely think it was the time factor, just not having the time to do it. And I will say, though, that at the school where I was working, when I participated in this study, the principal also accompanied us on home visits, and she saw all the benefits of doing this kind of work. And she actually gave us time that normally we would have spent in a professional learning session on Wednesdays. The students were dismissed early so that we could have a 2 to 3 hour professional learning session. She gave us one of those professional learning session times a month to go out into the community and make home visits. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
I was going to ask you kind of as a follow-up, like, what would you suggest as in terms, if someone wanted to try to implement this at their schools, what would you suggest in terms of first steps to do something like that?
Maybe finding a buddy that isn't also interested in doing it, because part of the power of this research project was the study group. Because there were university researchers from the University of Arizona that had kind of conceptualized and designed the project, and then they recruited the teachers. And so the study groups were very powerful places where they were sites of mediation, where, I mean, when you go out into your community and you go into students' homes, you're like overwhelmed with so much information. And so what you're seeing, and I love that idea, David, of having a special interest group. I think that would be awesome. But you're so overwhelmed, and you get so much information, and it's hard to know what's important, what has potential to be used in the classroom. So the study groups were really important in terms of just having that support with each other. So having at least one buddy in your school that is also interested in doing this work is huge.
I love it. Anyone else have any questions? We're a small enough group, we can just take yourself off mute and ask. Or if you want to give any comments as well.
So I will say that it's a very different climate now than when this research study was done. The research study that I've been talking about was done in the early 1990s, before the kind of the standardization and the standards and accountability regime kind of took over. So I would say we had more freedom, and it was a different time, a different climate in education. So I think there are definitely more challenges because of today's climate. And the other thing is that even just visiting and really coming to know one student in their home made me look differently at all my students, even if I hadn't gone in their homes, because I realized how much I was missing just by interacting with them in the classroom setting. By stepping out of the school, out of my comfort zone, and going and visiting a student, I saw that child in, fully in all of their dimension within their family and their social network. And it really shifts the way you view students. So in the original research study that I was involved in, we were only asked to select 3 students to visit. But we were asked to visit the homes of those 3 students 3 times. And also to interview that student. We did have questionnaires, so I think I'll share kind of an abbreviated questionnaire with you, so that you're welcome to share that as well. Anybody's certainly welcome to adapt that. But the questionnaire wasn't like a sociological type of questionnaire where you were expected to get all the information. the questions were really just kernel questions, just to kind of open up a dialogue. So we had a different question over each visit with maybe 15 to 20 questions. But if the first question sparked an hour or 2-hour dialogue, that was fine. We didn't need to ask the rest of the questions. So they were more just to help us get at what are the productive activities of this family? What are the children involved in? What kind of activities does the family engage in on weekends? What other family members or friends do students interact with? So I'm happy to share that as well.
You know, Kathy, I have all these questions now in my head.
Yeah, me too.
I know, but I gotta ask, do you know of any studies that have been conducted on funds of knowledge with monolingual L1 English speakers and from the white verse or compared to culturally linguistically diverse students?
I suspect there are. What do you, Lori, do you know of any, or Josephine?
I don't know of any. Mm-mm.
Oh, George TESOL article. Okay.
Because I'm
I
thinking
do know.
about go ahead.
Well, I do know that this idea has been taken up around the world, and I believe there are actual. If you Google funds of knowledge, Norma Gonzalez, who was one of the original co-PIs on the research study that I've been sharing, she shared with me recently that there's even an organization just dedicated to the funds of knowledge. I'll see if I can find that link as well.
I'm super interested.
Yeah.
My area is language assessment and testing, and this has nothing to do with my area, but this is so fascinating.
Oh, but it could.
Oh, I know. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But
Yeah.
but I didn't even talk about language and literacy as being funds of knowledge, because they definitely are. So there's that whole component as well.
But I'm also thinking about, we have a talk in like 2 months on sharing access scores with families. And if you have this rapport already built with the families, how much easier could that kind of conversation be?
But Karen, I worry though, if people don't have the assessment literacy to actually discuss what or how to interpret the numbers.
You are correct.
So sorry, that's my background.
You are correct. And I started seeing some stuff about that when I was looking for articles for that one. Yeah, that's a huge thing. But I'm thinking other part I was thinking about, so in the early 90s, Jacqueline Irvine publishes this book on Black students and school failure, but she talks about this concept of the lack of cultural synchronization, which I think is it goes beyond one particular race. I think it's uniform across cultures, because we don't have a very heterogeneous teaching force. And even if we did, the kind of students we have, especially in the public school settings, is very different a lot of times from the backgrounds of the teachers. And so there's a lot to be played out. There's a lot of connections that need to be made there. And I think this funds of knowledge approach is right on target with where we ought to be in terms of thinking about families as an asset to our schools and not a liability. So I think this is really powerful.
And that opens it up to the whole community, because I had, as anybody aware of Green Card Voices? They presented, right? They came to our school. We had one parent who was not very happy about some of our ESOL population for her child being in there. And after those kids came in and spoke, we opened it up to the whole, it's like a PTA meeting. So it was ESOL families and non-ESOL families. And the perspective of some of those parents that had non-ESOL children, it totally changed their views of things. They were even having, they're buying that book and having those kids autograph the book for their kid.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So Georgia TESOL for giving me that grant.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Well, it is 6:31. I feel like I'm on a roll now. I'm like, David, I want to keep talking about this.
Well, I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to stay for about another 5 minutes or so if anybody else wants to say. But yes, I was going to point out also that the time is up, and it's been amazing spending this time with all of you. And feel free to reach out to me with any further questions, or if there's anything I can do to support you. I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to continue talking about this. So
Kathy, you want to put your email in the
sure.
chat? And then
Yes.
if people want to ask more questions, they can do that. And I did put the link for feedback in the chat as well. If you don't see it, I can repost that. And you'll get an email from Georgia TESOL as well. So thank you all so much for coming. And again, if you want to stay around for a couple minutes and chat some more, you can, but I'm going to stop the recording here and you can talk more. Thank you, Kathy, so much for your work.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. This was so wonderful.